right, so welcome everybody to my disc or Twitch stream. Today we're going to be talking to Trill, the longtime infamous, but now getting a lot more attention, certainly when it comes to rating, in the Windwalker community especially. Um, showing that spring green bar nice and high up on the meters. So thank you very much for coming.
Thank you. Happy to be here.
Awesome. So, we'll kind of dive right in and try and hit through a bunch of topics, and then maybe have some time for uh, questions and stuff at the end from Twitter and from the people in stream. Um, so I guess to get started, for anybody, for some reason who doesn't have any idea who you are, why don't you give them a quick rundown, a quick introduction for yourself?
Sure. I go by Troll for the most part. Some people knew me in the past as Zess or XES, over like back in like WoD or Legion days. I've been playing WoW pretty much like my whole life. Like I'm 22, game's been out 16 years. I wasn't very good until Mr. Pandaria, which is when I started playing Monk. That was when I got my first rank one title at the end of MOP in Prideful Season, and then I joined the more towards the rating side in WoD. That's when I met Max before Max was, a big deal. I met some really cool players in the guild I rated in, which was Exiled Legion, and uh, they kind of paved the way for me. After that, I got into Limit in March of 2017, and after that is when I started competing in tournaments, with my current arena team, which was with Mez, Siu, and Sam I am. And then the rest is history. I've been competing in PvP and I've been raiding with Limit, and we've been doing really, really well.
Yeah, definitely. Certainly congratulations on the world first. I know a lot of people were rooting for you guys this time around to make it two in a row, so nice job.
Yep, the back to back.
Yeah. So a lot of people don't know, but I interviewed you. I guess it would have been a couple years ago now. I think it was back in Legion. I think it was after Gul'dan or something around that time.
I think it was Tomb, was it?
Yeah, you might be right. Yeah, so you've kind of been in and out, of the spotlight for a variety of different contents. But being that my focus is on Monk and on Windwalker, certainly try and get a chance to talk to you whenever you're playing Windwalker.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess the first question, and certainly already going out of order from my list of questions, but the first thing is, how are you feeling about Windwalker in Shadowlands?
Windwalker and Shadowlands is actually been one of my favorite iterations of it, I think, so far. I mean, Tyrell Brew was definitely high up on that list, and I think the two piece, four piece like Serenity thing from Tomb Sargeras was also pretty high on that list. But this like meta of Windwalker has been really, really enjoyable. And I absolutely love this class again. I couldn't imagine maining anything else right now. It's just so much fun, and so many people have, even in my guild now, I've just started playing Windwalker as an alt because it's just so much fun and so strong.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I know, the fun aspect has kind of always been there. It's the strength that has been lacking a lot of times. And you kind of hit on something, since you mentioned this is kind of one of your favorite iterations of Windwalker. A lot of people kind of think back to Tomb of Sargeras with Serenity and with the six-piece bonus and stuff as kind of the pinnacle of design. I know myself as one of them. How do you feel that current Windwalker's design kind of compares to some of the designs in the past?
I mean, so I want to. The first thing I want to talk about with that is like the canceling of Fistfury. I know that's been a really hot topic right now, as far as like, should we be doing this? Like, is this the right thing to do? And we did it back then just because of the cooldown reduction on it, and we're actually kind of back to that with the weapons of order thing, and just how powerful like that extra cooldown reduction from like on blackout kick is. Um, and I think it plays just really really well, and I think it's a really fun playstyle. I think it just shows how fun it is to have Rising Sun Kick be such a strong ability again, and really like has a punch to it again. Now
Yeah,
that Strike of the Windlord is gone.
yeah, and that's certainly something that people are kind of longing in, for days past of, kind of that big, powerful ability that we had in Strike of the Windlord. So
Hmm.
I definitely agree that it's nice to have Rising Sun Kick have a little bit more umph, especially since we did spend a little bit of time in BFA, kind of going in and out of considering not casting it at all.
Yeah.
Which is certainly less than ideal from a design standpoint. All right, so right now, as you mentioned, Windwalker is super strong, certainly in rating. Um, the last time it was this strong, towards the top of the meters was Antorus,
Hmm.
where Windwalker kind of had the perfect confluence of tier bonus, buff, legendaries, stuff like that. How do you feel like the strength, kind of the power of Windwalker compares now to how it did back then?
Uh, I think the main thing here that we're seeing in Castle Nathria is the fact that like the burst AoE that we have available to us, especially on a fight like Stone Legion Generals or Denathrius, I think it shines so much more on those types of fights. Um, like Spain Crane Kick right now is just really really strong. Uh, about as strong as it's ever been. Like, I mean, we could go back to uncapped Mark of the Crane stacks in Legion, and compare it to that. But um, as far as like melee damage goes with AoE caps and stuff, like we're competing with unholy DKs on AoE, and that's saying something considering how strong Epidemic is. But our single target is nothing to scoff at. I mean, we have really really powerful 2 minute CDs that can be used for single target or AoE, and that's a really really powerful tool to have in this type of raid design as
Awesome.
far as fights go.
Yeah, and I agree, and I'm glad that you mentioned kind of the uncapped mark of the crane, because certainly with calculated strikes, that's the kind of level of performance we're looking at in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
All right, so to kind of get into some of the more recent stuff, and you mentioned it, in regards to some of the strength. Is there anything that you feel like Windwalker is lacking, or things that you would like to see buffed or tweaked a little bit, either utility-wise, damage-wise, rotation-wise? What kind of changes do you think you would make if you could?
Well, I think Windwalker in general, the utility side has always been like being able to quickly fill into somewhere where like the raid wouldn't normally be able to. Like for example, being able to fly a serpent kick into something that's about to like a soak that's about to go off. That's like your main like strength like raid wise a Windwalker because windwalking is not necessarily like you don't bring a windwalker for windwalking, but there are things that they could do to windwalking that could make it like something that you could bring Windwalker for, like like a Stampeding Roar type of thing. Stampeding Roar is really really strong right now. Now that they brought it back for all the specs of Druid, and that's something they could do to bring Windwalker back into like a more like a utility thing. Um, and as far as other things go, I think you talked about like damage or something. Fist of Fury is just a really I don't know. It doesn't feel like it's missing a lot of the power. Like because we had open palm strikes in BFA that really bumped up Fist of Fury's damage. It doesn't feel like it has that power to it anymore.
Yeah, I agree. Definitely, we got to the point certainly later on in the expansion where Open Palm Strike was providing 50 to 60% of the strength of Fist of Fury, numerically. So
Mm-hmm.
certainly without it, I know a lot of people have been kind of wishing it would hit a little bit harder. All right, so the flip side of that, is there anything that you feel like, obviously it's great Windwalker is strong, and no one wants to see it back towards the bottom, but is there anything you think maybe could use to be toned down a little bit in uh, PvE or PvP?
I think I think this is coming anyway probably, but the calculated strike conduit I think is a bit over the top in terms of like having it versus not having it for AOE. The difference is just massive. With 6 stacks of Mark of the Crane. It's night and day how the difference between it doesn't it over double its damage.
Yeah, I mean, you figure it can add, you know, I mean, each thing is, by a factor of 6 per target. So, yeah, I mean, it can certainly double or even more, even greater than double the damage that Spinning Crane Kick does,
Yeah,
depending
I
on the
I
item
think
level.
I think the gap between that should be reduced a bit and then like compensated in other areas.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, that's been kind of the default answer as you've seen. I know we've talked about before in Discord and stuff. A bunch of people have about that. That kind of being the one thing that, even if it were to be nerfed, Windwalker would still be, strong enough. It wouldn't crater the spec certainly at all.
Hmm.
All right, so moving on, you mentioned a little bit about canceling Fist of Fury, and stuff like that. And one of the questions that we get a lot, and one that got asked a couple times for this interview, was how do you feel about canceling Fist of Fury? Do you think it makes sense? Does it feel like it goes against design? What are kind of your opinions on just that aspect of canceling the ability?
Well, it's a funny thing because we've been canceling Fist of Fury in PvP basically since Sword and Fire, like the new version of Sword and Fire, has been in the game, uh, because it's just more burst and to quickly cancel it just to get a one dragon punch off. Since your images are actually casting abilities while channeling that Fist of Fury. I don't know if that's intended or a bug or what, but it's been that way since the ability has been in the game, and it actually feels like really natural for me right now to be canceling Fist of Fury the way we are, just because
Okay.
of that interaction between the clones and the player.
Yeah, I mean I guess that makes a lot of sense since it was something that had been going on in PvP. It certainly would bridge the gap, for players that are already accustomed to that. And to my knowledge, the fact that they kind of continue doing things was just one of those things that got added, years ago in order to prevent us from losing damage. Similar to using Storm Earth and Fire and Touch of Death and getting, extra Gale Burst damage and stuff like in the past. So I think it was one of those things that it was technically intended, but it was intended to fix another problem that then created, an unforeseen situation.
Yeah.
Um, all right, so what? All right, so moving away from that, obviously the big time that we use that we cancel Fists of Fury is inside Weapons of Order, which is the Kyrian Covenant ability. So how do you feel about the Covenants and the Covenant system, kind of as a whole?
Uh, I'm a bit disappointed in a lot of the covenants from Monk. Actually, I feel like none of them actually changed like how you play except Weapons of Order. Um, Certainly, Bonedust Brew can at times because of the Chi refund on Spinning Cranky, but Fallen Order is just fire and forget. Failing Stomp just like, oh, it lit up, press it again. They don't really do anything special, and Failing Stomp, especially, I think can be really boring if the mob is like, on the move a lot, and you can't fight in your Failing Stomp. I think that's probably one of the worst feelings ever if you're actually a knife player and you drop it, the mob moves out of it, and you're like, no, my failing, like you can't do anything about that, and so you really just you look at that, and then you look at Vent Theory, you look at Bone Dust Brew, and you just think, well, what choice do I have? And Weapons of Order is just like that thing. It syncs up with Suen, and then it just plays really smoothly, and I think it's without a doubt the best covenant, the most fun covenant too for me.
Okay. All right. So if you could take away kind of the ability, is there you know aesthetically
Mm. You cut out.
Eric, can you hear me now? Oh, there you go. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
All right. I don't know what happened. Why the headset just decided to turn itself off, but it's brand new, so I'll have
Hmm.
to figure that out a little bit. All right, so yeah, so what I was saying was, is there any, looking at the, the covenants, any one that you feel like aesthetically or lore-wise that, if it was not for Weapons of Order and its strength and fluidity, that you would kind of be drawn to?
Well, I can tell you, I wouldn't be Night Fae. uh, I don't know. I probably would either still be Kyrian or I guess Venthyr. I probably wouldn't go Necrolord. If we're talking about like purely like what is the strongest signature ability for us, it's probably still Kyrian. I think.
Sure, I mean, certainly from a PvP perspective, being able to remove some of that bleeds and curses and stuff, I could see that being useful.
I mean, you could argue that the Night Fae Soul Shape would be like a good counter to ourselves. Like, let's say you're fighting another monk 1v1, right? And then he matches all your mobility, but he's carrying your Night Fae. You sneak away because you have Soul Shape and he doesn't. You could argue that. I don't think Door of Shadows is necessarily like too good for us, just because of the cast time. But I definitely don't think Necro Ward is very useful to us, except for when you have the Soul Bind, like that makes you immune while you're channeling it. That is very good.
Right, you could use that as a pseudo defensive.
Actually, I wanted to talk about that too. If I wasn't Kyrian right now, I probably would be Necro Ward just for that. I think that that Soul Bind is particularly strong in PvP when you get to that type of renown.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I know that's kind of a big thing is that you kind of do all of the content, not just focus on one.
Yeah, and
Um,
it's also just that 1 minute like burst window that lines up really well with Thug Sweep, and I think it would actually play really well.
yeah, I could see that. I did my first arenas of the expansion yesterday and today, trying to get some type of point of reference for talking to you about some of that stuff. So um, I'm still learning some of that as well.
Mm-hmm.
Mostly just kind of listening to my more experienced partner and attacking what he tells me to attack. But all right, so let's focus a little bit more on rating. Obviously that's kind of the biggest thing, a big kind of spotlight that's been on you and on Limit and stuff recently, with the race to world first and stuff. How did you kind of feel about the race itself as a whole? Did it feel like a race to you guys? I'm always interested about how it, whether you guys are actually, watching other guilds or worrying about other guilds or really, kind of feeling like there's actually a competition thing, or whether you guys are so kind of locked into what you're doing that everything else is kind of background noise.
Yeah, I mean, definitely, there's always the back of it in the back of our mind, thinking about Echo. Echo is definitely our main competition. I'm sure you saw how long, uh, you know, Stone Legion Generals went without being killed by anyone but us.
Yep.
I didn't think it would go that long. But at the end of the day, you really just have to worry about what you're doing and not what about they're doing, because the only thing that matters is what you do and what you do with your time and how well you spend it. And sure, you could maybe you could learn something from them, but you could also be doing the right thing. And it was close the whole time. Definitely, they were right on our tail the entire time. They killed Stone Generals like a bit after us. They killed Sludge Fist pretty much, a couple hours after us. It was a really close race,
So,
but it was exciting.
this obviously is something that gets talked about a lot. Being that Europe starts, a day after us. Being that you kind of play at that level, do you advocate for starting at the same time? Do you think it would make a big difference? Do you think it would have little to no effect on things? What's your opinion on that kind of stuff?
Uh, I think it would be, I think it would be cool to start at the same time. Because they already do that for classic grades. I know classic grades are obviously way different. They're already figured out. Um, there's no like maintenance prior to them, but I do think it would be cool. I think it could be feasible uh, to to start the raid earlier in NA, and then a bit later in EU because we NA already got like a kind of a late start on Tuesday because the maintenance got extended so long. While they had like the full day on Wednesday when they started.
Sure. Yeah, that definitely kind of cuts down on any perceived head start. So, what did you feel about, how did you feel about the raid as a whole? Do you get to, when you're kind of rushing through, and doing this to kind of get world first and stuff like that, do you feel like you get to kind of enjoy the raid, or is it very, business like? Like, I know you guys have, obviously you went and re-cleared, before getting Denathrius down, so you got to kind of see the bosses again. And did you enjoy the raid, or is it very much more, focused?
I think that's one thing about like Limit's guild atmosphere in general is that it's actually very laid back and we're all having a good time while we're playing. It's not like we're yelling at each other or barking orders all the time. It's very chill. It's very fun, um, and I think I did enjoy the raid. I think this is one of the best like first raid tiers of an expansion almost ever. Like this was tuned so well. Like in the first week when we killed Sludge Fist, like we killed him like as we were about to die. Stone Legion Generals we killed 10 seconds before they enrage, and I don't think Sire Denathrius really was killable on the first reset with how much health he had. So uh, I just gotta say that they did such a good job tuning this raid. It was actually really really fun.
Good. Yeah, I know that, just from watching your stream and listening to Max going back through and talk about that stuff, I think one of the things that impresses me and impresses a lot of other people is how casual you guys seem to be. Certainly even with Denathrius, goofing around and stuff, and freaking out when you get the extra half of a tenth of percent, as he drags you down.
Mm-hmm.
And stuff like that. And I think that was one of the things that, when you play at that level and you can kind of trust everybody to do their job, it's okay to, you guys can goof around a little bit and have that fun without needing to be serious all the time. And I think that's one of the things that people might not expect for playing at that level is once you're up there, it's not quite as much of a hard focus because you know when to kind of turn the focus on and off and still kind of get done what you need to get done.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so talking about Windwalker and raids, and you talked about this, um, a little bit earlier. Um, what do you think? What do you think is kind of the couple things or the big things that make Windwalker strong in raids?
Yeah, I think the 2 minute CD like setup, hunters with true shot, especially like I think that lines up really well for a lot of bosses right now. Uh, just the 2 minute damage profile, and on top of that, like I said, our burst AoE and just our AoE in general is just one of our top strengths right now. I think spinning crank, it just being as strong as it is. Uh, fight like Stones in Generals. There's like almost like on Mythic Stones in Generals. There's 5 targets usually available, which is almost as good as you can get. You can easily get 6 Mark of the Crane stacks on 5 targets, and whenever there's only that amount of targets, melee burst AoE is a lot better than range for the most part. So we really shine on a fight like that or Denathrius where Rolling Dragon Punch lines up with every set of ad spawns in phase one, and I think it really shows just how versatile we are when we can do that type of AoE and also do a good single target. I think the only thing we kind of lack is we had that type of spread out damage with the old Sword and Fire back in Mist of Pandaria and WoD when it got added, but I think we've picked up strengths in other areas since that like era of Sword and Fire.
Mm-hmm. Do when you kind of got in, obviously you had a little bit of an inkling since you kind of decided to start things off with Windwalker. But when going into the raid, did you kind of expect Windwalker to be this strong, or I know Max was asked, why you guys didn't have more Windwalkers, and he more or less just said, you were really the only one who had one prepped, and was confident enough, to play it at that level. Or there would have been more Windwalkers on the kill, especially since there wasn't quite the same level of immunities required and stuff through, as we have seen in raid tiers past. Um, but were you surprised to see Windwalker, performing so well, in your hands while raiding this time around?
We did a bunch of our own testing on the beta, and so to us, it wasn't really a surprise. It did. I still think I did better than I expected to, but I played a lot of beta prior to release, and I practiced so much with Weapons of Order and Zwen before you guys had like guides out for it basically and stuff, and I just like I said, I just played hours and hours on target dummies and just practiced over and over, uh, practicing the rotation and getting it down. And I think it really paid off because I ended up being really really comfortable in various scenarios with it. Uh, when to spinning crane kick, when to just blackout kick, and I think it really shows that I put in a lot of time in this because I don't think anybody expected Windwalker to be as good as it ended up being in this tier. Like no, not even I did. So I was really pleased with how I played.
Good. All right, so that kind of pivots back to another topic. So we'll jump around a little bit. But obviously a lot of people, a lot of questions that I got. I'm sure questions that you got on stream were, oh my God, what is Trill doing? What kind of magic, tricks, secrets does he have? Why is he playing Windwalker so well? What kind of secrets does he have? So can you take us through and maybe for the people watching, um, do you feel like you have some kind of magical or special secret that keeps Windwalker, that allows you to reach the levels that you do with Windwalker?
I don't think so. What I like to think is that I've just played the class for a very long time, and I put in the work for it. I practiced a lot, and uh, the practice just makes perfect when you play it this much. And that I also play with some of the best players in the world, right? That I learn from constantly, and I think that helps a lot too.
Okay. Yeah, I think that's definitely valuable. Certainly. So take us through your process a little bit. I know you said you did a lot of testing on beta and stuff. How do you go about figuring out what you're going to do as a Windwalker? Do you have large spreadsheets? Do you have a bunch of notes, scribbled down on a piece of paper? Is it kind of all internal, intuition, stuff like that? Do you have a process at all, or does it just kind of, come up naturally now that you've been doing it for so long?
No, I don't. I'm not a spreadsheet type of. I'm not a spreadsheet maker. I just play the game. I did tons of skirmishes in the beta. Made a lot of people complain about it on there, and yeah, I just was attacking a dummy. I noted what felt bad about what I was doing, and I tried some different things, tried some different openers. Ended up just sticking with the one that I felt was best, and it ended up working out. And I think in PvP, as far as that goes, I just went in and just did what I felt was right, as far as like bursting people, right? That I've done for so long. It's just natural to me now, just the way that we burst in PvP, just canceling Fistfury and all that.
Hmm. And I know certainly Windwalker has stayed strong in Mythic Plus and PvP back in BFA, whereas it hadn't been so in Raid. So it certainly makes sense that that stuff is going to be a lot more fresh in your mind because there really wasn't a downtime for that stuff for you. So looking at the Raid, and you can answer this either personally, your opinion, or based on how you think Windwalker performs. But what do you think was the best fight in Castle Nathria?
Just in general,
Yeah, I mean just
or for
like
Windwalker.
no, just for you. Like what fight can you like not wait to get in to do it again next week?
I mean, I just really like the whole mirror thing on Sire Denathrius. I think it's just a really fun concept, and the way the fight works with it, I think it's so sick. And I think the mythic like version of that was actually like pretty cool too. I mean, it could have ended up being more. deadly than it was. I think maybe it was a little less scary than we were expecting, but I think it was a cool mechanic, and I think it worked out pretty well. I just really liked teleporting across the room and having the boss just snap back to you instantly. I think that was just really cool.
Yeah, I definitely, from my own playing and stuff, felt very similar. The mirrors and the boss's movement, especially, um, no, it's one of those fights that, or, tanks complain a lot about positioning, and how unwieldy some bosses can be, but Denathrius is, how he kind of jumped around. Certainly, when you're going in and out of mirrors, it does seem like they paid a little bit more attention to that, so that he's not just kind of running from end to end. But the mirrors was definitely a unique way of looking at things that I was enjoying as well. Um,
I think I'd like to touch on actually the worst fight in the raid
yep,
is
that was my
without
next
a
question.
doubt Stone Legion Generals.
That's kind of what I
Stone
figured.
Legion Generals.
Yeah, I think that's been a popular sentiment, amongst. I know Max kind of said the same thing. So what was it about Stone Legion Generals that you really were not a fan of?
Uh, General Draven.
Okay.
Yeah, that guy on Mythic has no idea what he's doing. Basically, the difference between Heroic and Mythic Stone Generals is the fact that the commandos don't die on their own. The raid has to kill them, and General Draven like allows you to attack them. And so what happens is he flies around at like random spots, and he has to like perform like some action or some script or something, and sometimes it's just really slow. We had a pull where 4 came down in like 10 or 15 seconds, and a pull where 2 came down in like 30 seconds. It's just completely random. They can spawn on the complete opposite side from you, in which I had to go out and provoke them over to me because they were so far away. And like that, the amount of RNG on that fight is just hilarious. On top of the fact that the Stone Legion Goliath that spawn throughout the phases, they can leap on you like while other mechanics are happening, just based on like when they're spawned. Like so, if you spawn them at a bad time, because they spawn based on the boss's like health. Like one spawns as you push it, and then one spawns at like 75%. I think. So if you push the boss at 75 at a bad time, the Goliath's leap lines up with like a seismic upheaval, and you get wombo comboed because there's actually nothing you can do because it stuns you for some reason. To the point where I ended up playing a PvP trinket on that fight just because of that.
Yeah. No, I know, and that's something that I'm sure other people have experienced. To a lesser extent, but in the lower difficulties, I know it doesn't feel great when, as you said, you get wombo comboed because they jumped on you at the wrong time. Um, yeah, so I mean, I know that's been a common uh, complaint for a lot of people in terms of boss that was less than ideal for you guys. So looking at Windwalker and the raid, do you feel like um, the raid is, how much of, your performance, or how much of, Windwalker's performance in the raid is just Windwalker's kind of innate strength, compared to how much, do you feel is like, are the boss fights designed for Windwalker? Is Windwalker performing well because of, the boss mechanics, or in spite of? How do you think that the effect is between those?
Um, I do think Windwalker is innately strong on its own, but I do think that a lot of the fight like timers are good for us, like in terms of like lining up with 2 minute CDs. Generally, it's pretty. Uh, it lines up pretty well. Like, there's not a lot of times where a mechanic will overlap with having to do that. Like I think the maybe the one of the worst ones is like Hungering Destroyer. Like one of the what's it called? Consume. I
Consume,
think.
yeah. I
I
think it's
think
the
one of the
second one.
consumes lines up with your CDs, so you have to like delay them a bit. But other than that, I don't think so. I think our cooldowns are generally like pretty uninterrupted, and since they're so strong, it just really lends to our strength in general.
Okay. Yeah. Looking at at the raid, and and obviously you're in Discord, you kind of get to see some of the questions, stuff that people ask. If you could kind of give a one piece of advice to people who want to uh, be able to perform for Windwalker as well as you do, what would kind of that advice be?
Well, this I guess is, I mean, it would still apply to people that weren't Kyrian, but I think the number one thing is if you're Kyrian, just to practice, 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 and always be learning something about weapons of order, just in general, because it's such a unique ability. We haven't had an ability like this, basically since Serenity was, uh, I think like WAD Serenity, pretty much.
Yeah, I would agree.
So I think just mastering weapons of order is really key uh to like perfecting Windwalker right now.
Okay. All right, so that actually allows us to circle back. Somebody had a question. You mentioned when you were testing weapons of order, that certain things felt bad, certain things felt good. Um, how did you kind of come to that conclusion? How do you kind of know what feels good? Especially early on in, when there might not have been, logs to use or damage meters, stuff like that. Given your experience and the level that you play at, can you explain a little bit about what you mean by, something feeling good, feeling bad, when you're going through testing those stuff?
Well, you know me for a while. I've been a Fury crafter the whole time.
Yeah.
Um, and I like to think that when I first started playing with Invoker's Delight, because I started off playing with the Crackling Jade Lightning one actually. I started off playing with Last Emperor's Capacitor, and it felt fine. And then I started playing with Invoker's Delight, and I was like, "Whoa, this feels really good," uh, because it was.
Hmm.
And I started noticing that every fourth global was a was a Rising Sun Kick, and that I had the buff up almost the entire time. And so I was like, like what to do about this. And then I read something about you guys canceling Fistfury, and I was like, wait a second. And I started doing it because people weren't really sure about it yet. And I was trying. I
Hmm.
was like, this feels really fucking good. So sorry for that actually. But yeah, once I started canceling it, it just was really a really smooth rotation, and I really really enjoyed it.
Okay. So when obviously performance is going to be a big thing for you, but when you're looking through stuff that how do you weigh kind of things feeling good versus things doing good numbers? Um, how do you kind of decide oh, this feels like garbage, I don't like doing this, but it does really good numbers, so I'm gonna or vice versa. How do you handle that kind of situation?
Uh, I don't know if I have a good answer for that actually.
Okay.
Um, I I just tried a whole bunch of different openers and stuff, and I just opener. I guess opener was the one thing. I actually ended up doing a really weird opener on Sludge Fist. I was hit combo, but I was still double tiger palming at the start
Mm,
because I didn't want to use Expel Harm or Fist of the White Tiger to get to 5 chi. But since you can start with one with Expel Harm, like that was the only. I'd have to use both Chi Burst and Expel Harm, or Chi Burst and Fist of the White Tiger to get to
mm.
5. So that was the only like 5 Chi route that would prevent me from using one or the other.
So why didn't you want to use those abilities in the opener?
That's actually one thing that I think is understated about Fist of the White Tiger is how important it is for the opener of Weapons of Order and just how it syncs with it in general. I mean, it's a 30-second cooldown, so if you use it on cooldown, it lines up with every Weapons of Order anyway.
Hmm.
But also, uh, like every chi matters so much in Weapons of Order, which is what I noticed because with when you're keeping up that buff all the time, the -1 chi cost to your abilities. There are points where you spent your last chi on Rising Sun Kick, so you're at 0 and you just pressed it, and you Blackout Kick again, Tiger Palm, Blackout Kick, and then you're back to 1 because you go 2 to 1 because you still have the buff up, and that just it's harder to do that on your first one, unless you're playing Ascension and you have 6 or something like that. You know.
Okay. Yeah, that makes
Uh,
sense. So you're talking about instead of using fists of the white tiger to get chi at the beginning, you're talking about using it to, in the middle of weapons of order for the extra kind of chi
right.
cushion.
You keep everything going so much. You keep that smooth rotation going so much longer by like getting that extra 1 chi in there because
Sure.
it's like literally an entire Rising Sun kick when you have that buff up the whole time.
Yeah. No, I think that's a great point and not one that I had personally, considered, but certainly I think being stuck in, a lot of people listening and stuff, the concept of using Tiger Palm back to back, may still sound completely crazy, but certainly given its relative weakness and the fact that we're not even, that a lot of us are not using hit combo, um, it's certainly a very reasonable thing to be able to do. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and especially if it allows you to use Fist of the White Tiger inside the buff, I think that's an excellent point. All right, so I mean, before we move on, away from rating, is there anything else you wanted to say about the raid or Windwalker and rating or anything like that?
I think we covered most of it. I think another reason, though, as to why Windwalker was considered like so strongly by us at the start was because Brewmaster and Mistweaver were also like pretty weak, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we saw Echo using a Brewmaster instead of a Windwalker at the start, but that was just I think that was just the wrong choice. In general, I think the other DPS I think it was pretty clear that Arms Warrior and Havoc DH were way weaker than Windwalker even before I was, uh, considering banning it. I think
Mm-hmm.
that even just generally beta logs just showed just that Warrior was pretty weak for a long time on there, and Brewmaster being nerfed as heavily as it has been. Brewmaster does good damage, but it doesn't have that like super strong stagger that it used to have. That was making it like the best tank where you bought 2 Brewmasters, on
Right.
every fight before. Uh, that
Which
part of Brewmaster is gone.
I'm sure a lot of people who play the other specs are kind of happy to see the king dethroned a little bit, certainly when it comes for rating and having a little bit other flexibility, not always feeling like they had to have two brewmasters. So I guess everything ebbs and flows. And for Windwalkers, we benefit a little bit too because then there's one less person in raid to give out Mystic Touch, which certainly helps.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so let's move, a little bit to Mythic Plus. Obviously, you have um, a little bit of experience in that regard. Um, you could certainly say. How do you feel about the dungeons and Mythic Plus so far in Shadowlands?
I think dungeons have been pretty fun, especially for the way we use cooldowns now. Sword of Fire, just in general, like the way we can play with it now, and the way the dungeon chain packs chain together, we have 6 stacks like pretty much the entire time that we're doing
Mm-hmm.
Mythic Plus, which is really really good for playing Dance of GG. I think like my favorite dungeon is probably Halls of Atonement, just because it feels like the freehold uh, of Shadowlands.
Mm-hmm.
I think my least favorite would probably be either Sanguine Depths or Spires of Ascension. Uh, some of the trash in Spires of Ascension is just not fun. Same with
Mm-hmm.
Sanguine Depths. Uh, it's just really difficult, uh, and the mechanics of them are pretty
Sure.
punishing to melee in general. But I definitely like how Windwalker feels in dungeons. It feels very very strong.
How do you feel about some of the new affixes? I know we got to see Spiteful this week for the first time on live. We've seen Storming and other stuff like that. How do you feel about some of those changes that were made to the affixes?
I didn't do a single dungeon on the beta at all, so I'm not familiar with most of them.
Okay.
Storming didn't feel like too bad, but Spiteful definitely has not been. I've only done one Spiteful dungeon, and it didn't. Obviously, it wasn't very fun either. For melee, it's definitely intended to punish melee, but I think we're pretty equipped to deal with that. They are CCable, they're slowable, they can be ring of peace, so I think we're equipped for that. But I have to say, I really like Prideful a lot.
Okay.
It's fun to kill that mob and just feel really really powerful for a minute. And I'm sure it's fun for healers too to not have to drink as much either.
Sure. Yeah, I get that.
But there's really nothing like getting that buff and then popping all of your cooldowns and just like absolutely cranking a boss.
yeah, yeah, I agree. Um, Spiteful this week, certainly not a big fan because it does, like you said, seem to be the one that's there to punish melee. Um, but overall, I think things are doing well. So given Windwalker's strength and your kind of relatively unique viewpoint of uh, doing Mythic Plus competitively, how do you feel Windwalker? Do you feel that Windwalker has a place in the, quote unquote meta? With its damage, do you feel like there's other aspects, other factors going on when it comes to that stuff? When we get to competitive MDI and stuff level Mythic Plus, do you think there will be Windwalkers involved, or maybe two Windwalkers or no Windwalkers? How do you feel about that?
I think the new isn't the new rule that you can't play the same
Oh, you're
class and
right.
spec.
You're right. Yeah, they can't double
I
up.
think that depending on what ends up being like meta as far as like the range go, I think Hunter is gonna end up being meta, right? Probably so. I think Windwalker will definitely have a spot there if you have somebody that can play it well. I still think that the thing there is that you have to play it well. I don't think you could like be a bad Windwalker and perform to the same level as like a bad Hunter, right?
Hmm.
I think you still have to know what you're doing, but I think when you know what you're doing, that it is an incredibly potent spec, and I feel like when played well, I would have a spot on a team like that.
Okay. So when maybe you could give a little bit of insight for people, but when well, actually I should ask, are you still planning on doing competitive Mythic Plus going forward?
No,
No?
I tried in BFA to compete in both at the same time,
Right.
and I was just spreading myself too thin. It was like a lot of sleep lost, a lot of stress that I didn't
Sure.
need, and I tried, but didn't work out.
So you're gonna focus your time a little bit more into arenas then?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I know. I just saw. I was when I was doing my arenas earlier. I saw Sea-Doo tweeted, that you and him got to almost 3K. Like the day that you guys killed Denathrius.
Yeah.
And I said to the couple guys I was playing with, like I couldn't fathom the fact that you killed Denathrius and then was just like, hey, let's go, you know, almost break 3K, in PvP, and just that level of the time that would be required to do that kind of stuff.
Yeah. We killed Denathrius like pretty early. I think it was like 5 p.m. Eastern.
Hmm.
So I took a nap. I got up, and it was time to play arena. And I mean, my gear is way better than most PvPers right now.
Hmm.
Most PvPer average eye level is probably like 200 ish, maybe mid 200s, and I'm 216 in arena. So the power gap between 216 and 200 is massive. Like I'm talking 7,000
Right.
health. Um, I have more health. Like I have 25% more health than people with fortitude on them. So
Hmm.
like it's kind of silly what I can do to people right now
Yeah.
with
Well, and I,
PvP
and I
depth.
know you were enjoying the very high item level weapons, um,
Well, yeah,
that I'm
I think I was the only person in the world first race, one of the only people with a 233 weapon to start.
Yeah, so actually, that kind of circle back to something, when looking at your performance in raid, how much of that is you being super good, how much of that is your gear being super good, how much of that is the spec being super good. Can you differentiate between any of that stuff, or is it all kind of part of the same whole?
I think it was a combination of all the things. I think that if I was less geared but still as good, I would have been maybe not necessarily top, but right about where the Unholy Decay Hunter pack was
Hmm.
for most of the pulls on the out there. I think if I was similar gear but I played worse, I think the same thing would have happened. Uh, and I think if the spec wasn't as strong, but I was as geared and as good as I was, again, I would have been. I think, as I was saying, I think the combination of all of those things being true is why I was, so far ahead of everybody else in that fight.
Hmm.
When I actually played it really, really well, because there were pulls where I, didn't have as good of pulls. If I messed up the first phase, there were times where I'd end that phase at like 1.8 million versus like 1.4.
Right.
And I knew when I did that, and I knew how to do it right, but I didn't necessarily always do it right.
Sure. So actually, that's a great segue into another question. When you're going through a pull and after, say you have a really good pull or you have, a pull that's not great, how do you go about, or, what kind of things do you do for the next pull, to kind of try and fix those problems or continue to benefit from, maybe something that you learned on the previous pull? How much is that kind of fight pull by pull iteration happening for you?
Well, I definitely noticed, like early in the pulls, that my opener had to be very precise. I always had to have expel harm on the pull, or my globals didn't line up well enough to
Hmm.
actually like get Whirling Dragon Punch off when I had to. If my Whirling Dragon Punch was late at all the ads are already dead.
Right.
So I really had to time it well. I had to like fixate my clones onto an Echo just to get the extra uh, Mark of the Crane stacks for the next one,
Hmm.
and I had to try and save Dance of GG procs for ad sets if I was trying to kill them fast. I
Right.
really noticed that on sets where I didn't have Sword and Fire, if I didn't have a Dance of GG proc, I would end up being 200 to 300k damage lower than if I had one. Not even necessarily just because it makes the spinning crank kick hit that hard, but it's just because it was free. I ended
Mm.
up, um, you know, expending all my resources, and I would just sit there unable to do anything for a good 5 seconds, and like just having that proc just kept me going the entire time instead, and I got more boss damage on those pulls too.
Sure. So how much of that is stuff that you had figured out beforehand versus needed to be figuring out, as you were going through the pulls?
I unfortunately didn't get to pull heroic Denathras very much, but I definitely noticed it on heroic too. I noticed that when I did my bursts correctly on the ads, I was leaps and bounds ahead of everybody else that was trying to do the same thing. And it was every single pull on Mythic that I was at least 25% ahead of the next person on the Echoes of Sin in Phase One.
Hmm. Yeah, and I know that's, for people watching, it might not seem as big of a deal, certainly at the lower difficulties, but at the higher difficulties, those things really are capable of doing quite a bit of damage, um, to everybody, and that's why that damage is important. Um, All right, so we talked a little bit about rating and Mythic Plus stuff. What do you think? Besides kind of Windwalker's strength, DPS wise, and the damage that it can put out. One of the big things that's been true for Windwalker for a long time is that a lot of the utility that Windwalker has is not really um, usable in a raid compared to where it's a little bit more usable in Mythic Plus, and then obviously a lot more usable in PvP. How do you feel that Windwalker kind of lines up or compares or is useful, um, compared to some of the other specs in Mythic Plus right now?
I definitely think that Tiger's Lust is a very like underappreciated utility, especially in raiding too. You know, uh, for example, on Stone Legion Generals, Reverberating Eruption is exactly a 30-second timer, and you can Tiger's Lust whoever gets targeted by it every single time, like on at least on Mythic. So that was what I started doing on some of our later pulls in that boss. But in Mythic Plus two, Ring of Peace and Tiger's Lust are actually really really helpful for your tank to kite with on
Hmm.
the higher the plus keys, where you actually have to do big pulls still, but the mobs hit too hard for you to face tank, so you gotta kite them. And so
Right.
a tank like a Vengeance Dage could already do that on their own, but it's still really really helpful to Ring of Peace the mobs, keep them all in like a slow, and allow them to just stay stacked and die really quickly.
Hmm.
And on top of just having the AoE like sweep, and being able to off heal when you can, because you can actually take care of your Grievous like fairly quickly by yourself.
Right. Yeah, I know
It's really
I've been with Expel Harm and stuff like that. It's been very easy to handle the Grievous. That feels just really nice to be able to do that yourself as opposed to needing to put that extra pressure on your healer.
mm-hmm.
I definitely felt that. Um, One of the things that you know a lot of Windwalkers and longtime Windwalkers, certainly like myself, um, and many others, have kind of had to deal with is kind of that negative perception that Windwalkers carry in a lot of pug content. I don't personally do a lot of pugs because I'm lazy and would rather just do stuff in my guild. And I'm sure that you're not going to be quite dealing with the same perception as a lot of others. But what do you say to people who kind of feel that um, it's very hard to get invited to groups as a Windwalker or to get approved in LFG as a Windwalker, both in Raid and in Mythic Plus. Do you think that's something that's justified? Do you think it's something that will change over time, or how do you feel about that kind of situation?
I know I've already had some people tell me that they've been getting into more groups recently, uh, in rating and M plus pugs, and I think that's really cool. I think that it's pretty clear that the spec has had a negative, uh, like it's been not very socially approved, right, for those other groups. It's without a doubt very clear, and hopefully that stigma kind of goes away as time goes on. Is it's definitely the spec is as strong as it's been, like you said, it's basically since Antorus, and uh, so I really hope that goes away going forward, and people are targeted less for their spec and more for the things that they should be judged on, which is their item level,
Mhm.
or their skill or whatnot.
So yeah, so keeping off that, one of the things when I was watching Max's Christmas stream, because he was going through all of the bosses, which is phenomenally helpful for a raider like myself that'll be on them in a week or two. Um, one of the things that got asked of him a lot, is people asking about those kind of comp decisions and people kind of sticking to the perceived meta, of what is best and not. And he was very outspoken, that really, even in limit, people are, the expectation that people are only going to play what's best and stuff like that, is really not there. He repeated very frequently that if somebody plays something well and they enjoy it, he'd rather them play that than have them hate every minute of it. Um, but that's certainly something that a lot of people in lesser progressed guilds and even guilds that are not super serious have to deal with, that this belief that Windwalker was not in the world first kills or whatever, so it's useless, so everybody's got to re-roll away from that. Or I'm sure we'll see, I'm hoping, fingers crossed, that we see a rise in Windwalker popularity, because of the success that you've had and others have had. But what do you have to say to situations, and other people out there that maybe might feel like, oh, I really like playing Windwalker, or I like playing this spec or that spec, but it's not meta, it's not showing up high on the colored bars on Warcraft logs. Do you think that kind of stuff is important at lower guild levels? Do you think it's irrelevant, or somewhere in between? How do you feel?
I think it is pretty irrelevant. Like I've heard Max say this a bunch of times, and like you don't have to like stack your comp up really if you're not going for like we optimize our comp a lot between what we have available, but like you said, like we're not going to force somebody to play something they don't want to play. Um, but I mean, just going back to the Legion era when I started playing with them, I pretty much only played Monk, and we were even in Tomb Sargeras, where Monk was still not really considered as like one of the best specs. If you go back and watch some of our old videos, like I was still pretty much top of the meter in
Hmm.
that raid on a lot of those fights, like Bait of Vigilance or
Certainly
Um,
fallen Avatar.
Talon Avatar was huge for it. I know Max has said that on his stream before, where I basically like I had Serenity for every single baby
Yep.
shield. Yep, and
Yep. That
it was
fight.
amazing on that fight.
Uh huh.
So in an era of arms warrior superiority in that raid, there's me and a Windwalker just competing with them, and I think that just goes to show like if you're really good at a spec, even if it's really bad, that you'll still be able to do really well. And
Good.
not that that spec was even bad at the time. It was just
Right. No, but
wasn't
a
armed
lot of
very.
people, I know a lot of the questions that I get in Discord and when I'm streaming and stuff is, kind of that very black and white, view of things. Specs are either the best or they're terrible.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm personally, happy to hear, people like you and Max, kind of trying to dispel that, that belief as much as you can, because I think it just it has no positive benefit. I think it only has a negative detriment to people's enjoyment of the game. Um, and I know I've been, I've advocated for, for Windwalker being fun, but certainly given that, its strength in Nyalotha and Eternal Palace, even I, changed and played Demon Hunter for a period of time, so even I have my breaking limit. Um,
Yeah,
but so yeah, so I mean that's been a big deal. I know that's something that people are very aware of and conscious of, because it does affect their, their enjoyment of the game if they can't get into groups because people didn't see their spec in a world first race, or it's not top 5 on the bars on Warcraft logs, or or it doesn't appear in MDI or whatever. Then people tend to be very binary about that sort of thing.
yeah,
So I know I was very happy to hear how adamant Max was in answering those questions on his stream, um, about that kind of stuff.
absolutely.
All right, so we talked about rating and Mythic Plus, and we'll get to some of the questions that people have. But last certainly not least, especially for you, is PvP. It is far from my area of expertise. Just the concept of arena makes my heart beat way too hard, and I seem to, I mean, I've been playing Windwalker, since it came out, and I got into an arena yesterday and forgot that leg sweep was a button, or forgot that I could detox things, so it just it shuts my brain off when I try to do it. But obviously, you've had a lot of success doing PvP at a very high level as well. But I know that PvP and arenas this expansion seem to be a little bit different. I'm hearing differing complaints for people in terms of it's all about who's got the best burst, or being able to blow somebody up in a single global or stuff like that. So uh, how do you feel about the state of arenas and PvP kind of this early in the season?
I definitely think that arenas are. I think it's good that the pace of arenas is fast right now, but I definitely think it's a little too fast. I mean, there are times I am overgeared, but there are times where I'm killing people in literally Fist of Fury Rise on kick.
Mm-hmm.
That's it, which is a little over the top, I think. But I think Windwalker is doing really well in this meta, surprisingly. Even though Karma is like Touch of Karma is very weak right now, right? People
Mm-hmm.
could break it in a global. I could break it in a global, and that's scary for us. But you can very easily exhaust people's mobility in this expansion with your own mobility, while still being able to keep up with others. Like, for example, I think one of the hardest classes to attack right now is actually an Affliction Warlock,
Mm-hmm.
because they're still mobile, they're casting all their dots, but they have a permanent slow on you for 50%, and they have Demonic Circle, they have Gateway, they have Soul Shape because they're all almost all Night Fae. Um, so they're really difficult to attack, but we're really really mobile, so we can stick on them, and that's something that not a lot of other melee can do right now. So we're actually probably one of the, if not the strongest melee I think right now in arena overall.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I know I certainly felt pretty strong until as long as I wasn't facing a rogue and a mage in twos, um, and then just dying in 5 seconds, and not remembering what my buttons go. So talking about that, what are some of the did you do a lot of arena in beta? I know you mentioned you didn't really do a lot of dungeons and stuff, but did you do a lot of arenas in beta?
I did tons and tons of
Okay, that's
skirmishes
what I
in the
thought.
beta.
Um,
Yeah.
so what were some of the comps that you felt? I know that's a big question in PvP. What are some of the comps you felt like were very strong for Windwalker?
I played a lot of different comps on the beta. Actually, I've ended up playing a lot of Windwalker DK with Mez. I played some Windwalker Ellie. I played some Windwalker Shadow Priest. Uh, I don't think I played any Windwalker Warrior, but all of those comps, I played into a bunch of comps. Played as a bunch of comps. I didn't feel like anything was weak. The only one I felt like maybe could have been a little weak was Windwalker like Feral,
Hmm.
but I don't even think we were playing it that correctly or with the right healer. So I think the main thing here to learn was that you could play with pretty much anything you wanted as a Windwalker this season, and you could do really well. Um, Compared to a season or two ago where your viable partners are like DK Mage, and that's like pretty much it. That's all you really
Right.
saw was like Windwalker DK, Windwalker Mage, Holy Pally doing well at the top, and nothing else. I think it's a in stark contrast to that.
Mhm. Do you have a preference for twos versus threes?
Uh, Not necessarily. Two's I mean the two's environment is more laid back. Certainly, there's less going on. It's easier to focus on what to do. It's mostly just like you know who does more damage in twos. It's
Hmm.
less about like the setup, unless you're fighting like rogue mage twos, right? The game's very fast, but the other games are more slow paced, whereas threes are very very fast paced no matter what.
Okay. So you like it's just kind of gives you different it gives you different levels of things that you're looking for.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So talking a little bit about PvP. Do and you might get asked this question a lot, and you might not want to answer the question. Do you have a preference between PvP and rating or Mythic Plus? Is there like if you could choose between the three and have to give up the other two forever, would you have one that you would pick?
Well, I think I'm obligated to give up PVE first. Despite it being what I started off with in the game,
Hmm.
I do think that PvP to me in general is more important. I have more friends in the PvP community. I've known them for a really long time,
Sure.
and uh, it's just I've just competed longer in that side of the game, and I have more roots in that side of it.
Okay. That makes sense. So looking at, the differences, what are kind of the big things that stick out for you in terms of Windwalker, whether performance or how you go about making decisions and how you go about doing things? What are kind of the big differences that stick out for you between arenas and rating?
I definitely think there's a huge emphasis on abilities like Transcendence. Like Transcendence is extremely powerful in PvP. Being not necessarily just because it's instant cast, but just like really good use of it. Like for example, like knowing where an enemy healer is, right, and being able to if they're on top of your portal, being able to transcend and kick them or interrupt them is like something that's really uh, you really have to know what's going on in the game to be able to do something like that. And also, Ring of Peace. I have some really funny clips of Ring of Peace because it doesn't DR. Uh, you know how mobs, if they're against a wall, like with Ring of Peace, they don't go anywhere. They just
Hmm.
kind of walk through it. Players will continue to bounce if they're against a wall. So you can pin someone against a wall with Ring of Peace, and
Hmm.
that's something I've actually gotten really, really good at over the 2 years I've had to use Ring of Peace now because we didn't really use Ring of Peace in Water Legion because it was on the same talent tree as like Sweep,
Right.
but since they've been separated, we've been using Ring of Peace now, and it's a really, really powerful tool against casters because for example, if you kick a Disc Priest on Penance and they try to cast Shadowman, but they're up against a wall, you put Ring of Peace in a spot where they get bounced up with a wall over and over, and suddenly they can't do anything, and they're helpless, and you just take them out real quick.
Hmm.
So I think Ring of Peace is also one thing that you can really master with the class.
Okay. Yeah, no, that's it's certainly a fan favorite for people who get to use that, and I'm sure it'd be very frustrating to be pinned against the wall for an extended period of time. um, yeah, so I mean that makes a lot of sense. Is there anything that through all of your testing, any comps or anything like that that you thought, maybe this isn't super strong, but damn, it's a lot of fun to, synergize well with this spec. It might not be the best, but you know, damn the numbers, it's just a buttload of fun.
I don't think so. I mean, I think in general, if that is happening, it's going to be a good comp in general. Like just Windwalker DK has always been a staple for our class,
Hmm.
and it's been our best comp basically since it's existed. Maybe not in Mists when DKs weren't as strong, but whenever DKs really picked up speed in WOD plus, it's been our go-to as far as comp strength. Just
Okay.
being able to grip somebody into the AoE like sleep. We used to have the Fistfury set on top of that, so our setups were really consistent, and it's lost a little bit of its potency since the 1 minute CD like sleep increased cooldown, um, and the loss of the Fist of Fury stun. But I still think it synergizes really well.
Good. One of the things I've been kind of seeing in terms of complaints recently about PvP, and again, I might be misunderstanding because I have very little experience in this kind of thing. But the idea that hybrids, right now are tend to be very strong, both in the healing that some of them can put out as well as the damage that some of them could put out. Is that am I interpreting that correctly, or is that something you've experienced as well?
Yeah, I've experienced that. I mean, we just had a game last night where a disc priest was at I think like almost 1% health. I was trying to touch death it. Touch of
Hmm.
death is, I could talk about touch of death all day, but um,
That
yeah,
was going to be my next question, so we'll get there.
the red paladin on his team healed him from 1% to 78% in one instant cast.
Hmm.
So that's a bit silly because Windwalker can't do that healing. I think a lot of other classes can't do that type of healing, especially instant. So
Right.
um, that's a bit disappointing. But in general, the pace of Arena is still welcome to compare to something extremely slow.
Right. So yeah, so you kind of touched on the next thing I was going to ask you about, and certainly is something that was kind of very polarizing in the mug community going into this expansion. And I kind of noticed it a little bit more as a thing in arenas when I was doing them. Um, is Touch of Death? Obviously the big change from Touch of Death, kind of going back to the way that it was in Warlords and before. Zuen kind of filling in that niche of burst, the Gale Burst type mechanic, even though it's a lot of smaller hits rather than a big hit. How do you feel about, kind of Touch of Death and um, its usefulness now compared to previously, as well as, kind of the switch from Touch of Death to Zuen?
Um, I I don't mind it. I think it's still like a fun ability, a fun like throwback to the original ability. But I think them trying to combine the 35% health thing from Legion's Touch of Death to the old like it instantly kills this mob type of thing. I don't think it's been a good mix. I think it would be so much simpler if it was just all of your health, anything under 15%, and that's it.
Hmm.
Because what we're doing now anyway is we're trying to time it on like literally raid bosses to get a little bit extra damage on it anyway. Because we're only going to get one use of it, you
Right.
know, 9 times out of 10. There are still some fights like Sun Legion or Denathrius where there's opportunities for that, but in general, you're only going to get one use on a single target boss, and it's better to get 35,000 out of it than 13,000.
Right.
Um, and in PvP, it's extremely frustrating because the trigger on it is so delayed that I've had plenty of clip screenshots where the target's at 15%. I'm here hitting touch of death over and over, and nothing happens. It says invalid target,
Hmm.
uh, and it's extremely frustrating.
Yeah, I know that was something I noticed last night that I almost, if I was going to open on somebody and, if I was expecting to take them down, I almost had to be pressing touch of death as I pressed, the previous rising sun kick, that would take them below 15. I know that delay was something that I pointed out and a lot of people pointed out on beta and alpha, and it exists in, PvE as well. Where you can't just walk up to something and touch a death it. There's like that kind of half second, but certainly in arena that half second can be the difference between killing the target and watching them get healed and having to
Yeah,
continue.
right. And I think it's really funny that you can't touch it at something that's on your focus either. If you
Hmm.
have something on focus and you're not targeting something else that can be touch death, you can't touch it with it.
Interesting. So yeah, so that it's just
It's
yeah,
really
and
silly.
I definitely agree with you on the 35%. Kind of and got changed and nerfed in a certain way, but yet kept the previous nerfs that had been made to balance it when it was completely different. So
Right.
I definitely think you hit the nail on the head with that issue with moving forward.
Like
Um,
try to touch death and dutiful attendant on Council of Blood. Like it's almost impossible.
right. Yeah. Well, and especially when you're also trying to do that on top of trying to just to slide that, everybody's trying to blow them up, and you're trying to catch it to kill them rather than, just that 15, just them being under 15%. And I know there are times even that people have reported, and I've seen that it should be something that kill them, but yet it doesn't. It does the 35% damage, even though it should have killed them anyway.
Hmm.
There certainly is a lot of weirdness um, with that ability, and I can absolutely understand how, especially in PvP, some of those issues with it are really going to be uh, pointed out and big thorns, in your side when trying to finish somebody off and get out of that arena match.
Hmm.
All right, so before we move on to any questions and stuff that people had, both in Twitch chat as well as on Twitter, is there anything else? Actually, well, before we get to that, talking about PvP, for people like myself who have little to no experience in it, what do you think is kind of the biggest piece of advice that you could give to people, um, going into PvP? Is it finding the right comp super important? Is it, practice? Is it, what do you think would be the top thing for people to get better at?
I think the way the game is right now, it's actually kind of the same answer for PvP. Is to really master like your burst and your well the main thing I guess would be your burst and your survival. Because Windwalker should be one of the harder melee to actually kill right now in arena.
Mm-hmm.
And on top of being one of the most bursty melee in the game. So uh, mastering that comes along with mastering your mobility, and all three of those things combined are they take a lot of practice to nail down, and the combination of all three of those is what makes Windwalker so deadly in arena. So really mastering your burst, mastering like the use of your clones, uh, not wasting your mobility, getting the most out of it, both offensively and defensively, and just being really hard, being really annoying to attack because that's what they are. Windwalkers are very annoying to attack for other melee, so uh, being like really evasive is a huge factor to not dying to other melee.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree. Um, Certainly, I know that that kind of control and stickiness that Windwalker has is kind of a big deal, for people to learn. So being able to um, put out those big, the big damage numbers and put the pressure on people while you're keeping up with them, I can definitely see why that would be a big, important thing for people to learn. All right, so let me put my glasses on so I can actually read what people were saying. All right, so get to a couple questions that people had for you. We've answered some of these, so we won't have to hit all of them. And I'm sure as I'm answering some of these, there will be more in Twitch chat. So the first thing, and we talked a little bit about this, but at Ishi2 on Twitter wants to know, do Night Fae monks have any chance in raids?
I mean, I think that it's pretty clear that the early renown levels were not very powerful for Night Fae. I think that it gains a lot of power towards the end renown levels, whereas Pelagos Pelagos used to have that versatility at the end of a tree, and now it's like magic damage reduction. So certainly the gap between Kyrian and other covenants will close a bit more once the raid's in full farm mode. But uh, as of right now, I think that Night Fae is a bit too slow for how bosses are gonna die when everyone's full geared. Like you're gonna you're gonna see like what's his name Shriekwing dying in like 2 minutes on the dot.
Sure.
So Weapons of Order is gonna contribute more to a short fight like that. Like Hungry Destroyer is gonna die in 3 minutes if it already isn't. Bosses are gonna start melting, and if they're melting it at that 230 mark, like that's where Weapons of Order is like king. Uh, so
Hmm. Right, just as
uh,
that second buff finishes up.
yep, it's really strong in those scenarios, and unfortunately, I think the longer the fight goes, the better Night Fae gets. So it actually would be like better on progression than anything else.
Okay. All right. So at Torito Danny, this is a very popular question. Do you believe that Windwalker are going to continue to be viable, going forward? Do you think kind of scaling that has plagued Windwalker as a problem for expansion after expansion? Do you think that's going to be a problem, or do you think Windwalker will be okay?
I mean, I don't think there's any world where we go from top to bottom in one tier, which we would have to do bottom DPS for probably for me to be like not necessarily me specifically, but for the raid to like take a brewmaster over a Windwalker, I guess to a raid,
Hmm.
uh, especially taking multiple Windwalkers if that ends up being a thing, like Max said it would be. I don't think that's likely to happen right now, unless the conduit, like the spinning crane conduit, is nerfed without any other adjustments being made. That might you know get rid of the whole multi Windwalker
Hmm.
thing that you talked about. But as of right now, I don't think it's gonna happen.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I know, I've written article after article about, scaling and talked about that a lot recently. And, a big thing that keeps coming up when we talk about scaling is that, you have to start from a place, to scale.
Mm-hmm.
Even if you get 95% the value out of stats from other specs, if you start in the middle, you're going to fall to the bottom. So I definitely agree that, where Windwalker is right now certainly gives a sizable cushion before scaling, puts Windwalker in a really difficult spot.
And I do think as well that the importance of main stat is also really good for us right now,
Hmm.
since secondaries before were actually like really close to agility in value, right? And then we get to this point now where it's almost triple the value of our best secondary stat, I think, right? At some
Hmm.
point. So I think that is a good thing for us in terms of casters like scaling really, really insane versus melee at the start of the expansion.
Hmm.
And also like the secondary scat or secondary stat scaling DR now
Right.
is going to be good for us too, because that means that people aren't going to want to stack more than like what 30% of a stat without
Hmm.
losing value on it.
Right. They're
So
certainly not going to be stacking things as mindlessly as they may have before.
mastery being as good as it is for us as well. So we're going to be basically verse capped, and then the combination of crit and mastery I think is going to keep us floating for a while.
Hmm. Okay. All right. So we mentioned this way back at the beginning in terms of Fistfury being, certainly not what it was like previously. So at PFW Poulgine asked, what changes do you think Blizzard could make to make Fist of Fury not feel so bad?
That's a good question. I mean, outside of just a flat number buff,
Hmm.
I'm trying to think like what I would do about it.
Do
Huh.
you think like big? Obviously, it gets kind of compared to I beam from demon hunters. Do you think having it be a shorter channel would help a little bit, or maybe the AOE damage split, stuff like that? What do you think?
Yeah, that's a good point actually. A lot of abilities right now, like think about ability like Ashen Hallow, right? It's not technically capped. Same with Spear of Bastion. It's not technically capped,
Hmm.
but it'll hit everything available to it. I think that Fist of Fury feels really awkward, like punching everything in front of you, but only hitting 5 targets, right? Does it 5 or 6?
It's supposed to hit 6. It does hit 5.
Okay,
Yeah.
nice
Right.
about that. Anyway, yeah, it feels really weird to be throwing those punches out and not hitting everything in front of you. I think Fist of Fury might do better off, even if it was nerfed. Like even if the AoE on it was slightly nerfed, like if it did more damage by hitting more targets, even if
Hmm.
it was reduced past 5.
Right. Yeah, I know that was something that stuck out was that it's one of Windwalker has kind of Fist of Fury and Spinning Crane Kick that are both kind of twice capped in my
Yeah.
opinion. Where fists it's supposed to hit 6 but does hit 5, but then in addition to that does 50% of damage to secondary targets. And then you got Spinning Crane Kick that's got Mark of the Crane capped as well as its own target capped itself.
Hmm.
So yeah, I definitely think that something like that would help. And I like your idea of the more targets that it hits, the stronger that it becomes. It's similar to, um, I think it was like Storm Fist for Strike of the Windlord, where you hit a bunch of the more targets you hit with it, I think you're uh,
The more stacks of that buff you
yeah,
gain.
and you
Yeah.
would do more damage with your autos or something after that.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I think that's a great idea. All right, so at Gulvin VS asks, should Windwalkers be thinking about the? Sorry, let me rephrase it the way he. Yeah, why should Windwalkers not think the dark days are over when we know that High Mall 2.0 is coming? Do you feel that
Uh,
Windwalker is gonna get the High Mall treatment like we did back when?
no way. I think that it was like I played in Eyeball. I know that we got nerf after nerf in Highball. I think it was very clear back then that that Windwalker was you know I guess Windwalker in general and that expansion just got nerfed a lot,
Mm-hmm.
and I don't think it's gonna happen right now. I think that a lot of other classes are too good for them to only nerf Windwalker,
Mm-hmm.
and they've already demonstrated that they're not gonna over nerf stuff, right? They were very like unholy DKs are already like really really strong, and they got like a slap on the wrist, right? Same with hunters,
Right.
they got a slap on the wrist. I think all we would really get in terms of a nerf, if a nerf is even deserved at all, is a slap on the wrist,
Mm-hmm. Okay. Yeah, I
just in
mean
their
that's
current iteration.
I know that's what I'm hoping, and at least I keep data every week, looking at Warcraft logs data and stuff like that, and at least for my statistics, Windwalker is not at the it doesn't have that gap, when in High Mall. I mean, if I remember correctly, certainly on Twin Ogron and Tectis, Windwalker was 10, 15, 20% higher than the next highest um, class on some of those fights. And even in Antorus, the gap between Windwalker and the next best was much higher. So, um, at least from my perspective as well, Windwalker's not in any danger of any sizable nerfs, with the exception being, maybe a small tweak to calculated strikes.
Yeah.
Like I think most people understand that would make the most sense if anything. Um, all right, so next, at Bucket Fridge asked, how long did it take to really feel like you've mastered or understood Windwalker and its nuances?
Uh,
I
as
know
far
you've been
as
playing
like
for a long
this
time.
expansion or
Yeah, yeah. I
like
mean, I mean, you've been playing for years, so this expansion. How long did you feel like? Maybe specifically talking about Weapons of Order. How long
okay.
did you feel like okay? Oh, I've got this. I'm good. I understand what I'm supposed to be doing here.
It definitely took me like a while. I practiced like I said for like literally hours on target dummy, just sitting there like I would do 30 minutes without moving on target dummy. Like 15 weapons of order casts in
Hmm.
one go sometimes. So um it took me probably like 2 months of beta to really feel like I had it down, I'd
Hmm.
say.
And then once what, and this is a follow up for myself, but when you did that, um, like did you feel like it was then easy to adjust, for different situations, or did you kind of feel like, okay, I have to learn it for single target, I have to learn it for AOE, stuff like that? Or did you feel like kind of once you understood and had kind of that natural flow to it that you had a good idea for different situations?
I definitely think it was easier for me to adjust what I was doing, uh, just when I was more comfortable with it in general. I only ever did I pretty much only ever did a single target like test with it. I never really did much AOE.
Hmm.
I kind of was just improvising when I was AOEing. I was just constantly improvising what I was doing and just seeing like, okay, well, should I blackout kick at all? Should I just spinning crane kick over and over? Um, I ended up just mostly spinning crane kicking with
Hmm.
Tiger Palm. There were some scenarios where it made sense to blackout kick instead of Tiger Palm, but like very rarely. Just because of how strong spinning crane kick was, and I actually would like to touch on that because calculated strikes was like bugged like all of beta, wasn't it?
Hmm.
So I didn't even know how strong Windwalker AoE was because I just
Yeah.
couldn't even use the conduit to test it. And then when it got fixed on live, we all started using it, and we're like, wow, this is actually nuts.
Yeah, yeah,
So
it didn't work at all for and coordinated offensive was the same way. It took, I think, really right up until the end before they started working the way that they were supposed to in game. So definitely made testing a little bit spicier than it should have been.
you remember when that strike clarity conduit was like a 30% mastery
Uh huh.
increase for a while?
Yep. And then they decided they didn't quite want it to be that strong. I mean, it's not
Mm-hmm.
very strong now, but certainly I think healthier than the position that it was before with all that mastery.
Oh yeah.
All right, so next question, a little more PvP focused. Um, Rhyme or Rim Rhyme 1469 asks, currently Windwalker brings mostly just tons of damage to PvP, um, and that can be affected by buffs and nerfs. What utility do you think Windwalker could get, or is there utility possibly missing from PvP talents or from the class as well to diversify what Windwalker can do?
I mean, I think Windwalker with anything more than it already has would be borderline unstoppable
Mm,
right now. Considering we lost Fistfury in BFA, and by the end of it, we were still like arguably the best melee
mm,
again. So I don't really think that there's anything we necessarily need, but I think that there are some PvP talents that are kind of worthless that
mm,
could be like redesigned and made better. Uh, Number one on the list is probably a talent called Windwaker.
mm,
It's like an automated like I want to say like Death's Advance type of thing where like you ignore like movement and pairing effects for 4 seconds every like 30 for people that are like affected by your wind walking. But I think I would rather see that as like an on use like AoE freedom, something like that.
mm,
I think that could be a really cool utility. That would you I mean you can kind of see that with Ret, like they have a talent called Unbound Freedom that when they use freedom on another target they get it on themselves as well. So it's kind of similar to that, but it wouldn't be a targeted thing. It would just be an AoE thing.
mm,
But I mean we still have access to disarm. We have access to ride the wind. So I think there's no shortage of like just general utility for the spec, but uh, I definitely think that we our main thing that we're bringing right now is just damage.
mm. All right, so Mr. Reptilian asked a bunch of questions that we answered already, but the one we didn't is, do you feel that Windwalker is still full of bugs? Do you notice the bugs that exist, or are they mostly gone?
I definitely noticed the bugs. I definitely also noticed that some of them are beneficial.
Mm-hmm.
to us, and some of them are not. But uh, particularly, I don't even know if they're bugs, but I'm assuming that the Mark of the Crane stuff is still not intended.
Yeah, that's definitely a bug.
So that's definitely working in our favor. Um, the spinning, like the what's it called, the Fistfury canceling is
hmm
probably a bug working in our favor. But then there's also the bugs, like I said, that aren't working in our favor, like Touch of Death being buggy, and clones sometimes still not casting abilities. That's still happening. Um, clone in general, clones in general, just being really poor AI. Like
hmm
for example, you know what Blades Arena looks like, right?
Yep.
So if you're attacking someone on top of the bridge and then they jump down, your clones have to travel the entire way down to them.
Right.
So that takes like 3 seconds, and then they can teleport back up. They gotta run all the way back up again.
Right.
So just the pet AI in general, like being reliant on that, is frustrating at times. But uh, in general, the class definitely has less bugs than it probably has had in any recent time. Like Sword and Fire is probably more tolerable than it's been in a long time, but they still have a ways to go.
hmm Yeah, I know there was a lot of fear about having to deal with the pet AI, back before Fallen Order was nerfed. And there was a lot of concerns about, okay, we're going to be dealing with Storm, Earth, and Fire AI, Zuen AI, and now we're dealing with these Fallen Order monks, AI, and are we really supposed to be a pet summoner class? Um,
Yeah,
so I know I personally was rather happy when it got summarily nerfed very hard, but um, it's still, you're definitely right that Windwalker does have a bit more pet AI to deal with than maybe it should for kind of the way that the class is supposed to be.
yeah. I'm still advocating for uh, the Storm and Fire thing to just be a 35% increase
hmm
and not have to worry about anything your images are doing. They should just be purely cosmetic at this point.
Yep, and I think we've been advocating for that since at least the start of Legion.
Yep,
Um,
yep. No
because
surprise there.
that would fix a lot of bugs. Doing so, it would solve, or at least just take off the table a lot of some of these other issues. That certainly makes the developers and designers' jobs a little bit more difficult when they put something new in for Windwalker.
Hmm.
All right, so next, and again, we touched on this a little bit, but this kind of brings up an interesting idea. Stanislav Gaki asked, "Is it possible that due to limits world first, we'll see a rise in action for Windwalkers, and thus will we get better numbers for the spec?" I'm assuming what he's at, like with more players, there'll be more better players, and the numbers will continue, to rise in that regard? Do you think there's kind of a feedback loop that could happen?
I mean, possibly. There are definitely players that would be good at Windwalker that just aren't playing Windwalker because they either didn't know it was good
hmm
or didn't think it was good. And now that they know it's good, that they would be more willing to put time into it and
hmm
learn it again and master it again. Uh, there's been plenty of players that have played in the past, especially as the main, and then re-rolled to it because in BFA it just wasn't good.
Right.
Uh, so it wasn't easy to just like brush it off, like, oh yeah, this class sucks. So I would like to think that that's true, and that we will see more play of Windwalker past this tier if it continues to be this strong, especially in farm. Uh, Although I'm still going to stand by the fact that I think Windwalker is always going to be weaker in farm than it is in progress.
Why do you say that?
Just because the flexibility of a cooldown like Sword and Fire just really lends us to be able to like adapt to like different damage situations on the fly, and when I don't know, just like the longer the fight goes on for us, like the better it is for us. It's maybe that's big Philly craft, but
hmm
uh, when mobs live a long time, we tend to do better. I don't. I just feel like it's always been that way for the class, especially when we
Yeah,
had like Tiger Brew and stuff.
it has. I mean, for me, that topic, brings up a lot of fond and unfond memories of Hellfire Citadel.
Oh yeah,
Certainly where Windwalker was,
legendary ring.
yeah, Windwalker was very strong to start. Arguably the strongest melee. And then people started to get the ring, and Windwalker had almost no ability to take advantage of it at the time. Without some of the soul capacitor cheesing and stuff that we got into later. But it there was kind of a precipitous drop in Windwalker's, relative performance once all the mages and the hunters and stuff started getting access to their legendary rings, and kind of the strength of the ring overcame, kind of the strength of the class of any of the classes itself. So anytime that comes up, my brain goes right back to Hellfire Citadel.
Yep, and I think that being Windwalker just has never been really that great with borrowed power. I mean, just look at essences,
Hmm.
just look at corruption. Like they just never played in our favor.
Hmm.
So hopefully, Shadowlands continues to lay off of that,
Right.
um, and we keep soul binds to a relatively minor modification, and just we just keep the conduits and the legendaries, and that's it.
Hmm. Yeah, no, that's always been something kind of strikes fear in the heart of Windwalkers is borrowed power, since we never ever get to take as much advantage of it as certain other specs do.
Yep.
All right, so next we only have a couple. Drew Burt Meng asked, "How do you feel about the addition of Dance of Chi-Ji to the Windwalker talents? Do you feel that the bursting mobs down in AoE makes up for the RNG that it's added to the spec?"
I think Days of Gigi was probably my favorite uh, trait that they added in BFA
Hmm.
to Windwalker. I mean, yeah, it does. It does suck that it's like pure randomness because you can get three in a row, you can get none for a minute. But it definitely feels really good when it does proc, and you definitely notice it a lot. Like
Hmm.
if you get a dance proc when you have six stacks when there's six mobs, like you just melt everything. Uh, so that feels really really good. But I do agree that it does. I do wish it was a bit more consistent
Hmm.
and not as spiky.
Yep. Yeah, no, that was. I was very happy to see it become a talent, and even advocated for getting rid of hit combo and rushing Jadewind, and putting the other, like Fury of Zuen and Glory of the Dawn in those spots as well, and just kind of making that the BFA trait talent row.
Mm. Can we talk about why our talents haven't changed in 4 years?
Yeah, you know what? I think the answer is they used up all of the potential changes when they were messing around with power strikes going into BFA, because power
Uh,
strikes and for anybody who doesn't, who's watching, doesn't remember, between power strikes and tornado strikes, our talents got tweaked a lot in very minor ways going into BFA, and then that was kind of it. And it really was just only those couple changes, and none of them were really overly big. So I'm definitely with you. Talent staleness is something that has been a long-standing gripe for Windwalkers, because really very few of them have changed for forever. I mean, some of
yeah,
them have been here for since the beginning.
and even the tuning of them like hasn't changed. Like
Hmm.
rushing Jwind has been bad since it's uh WAD
Yeah,
era pretty much. So
yeah. I
oh,
mean,
I guess we did briefly use it when it was like an energy ticking thing in BFA, but that was
yeah,
it.
and that felt awful because you could
Yeah.
accidentally turn it off with a tiger palm at the wrong time, and yeah, that was just
Yep.
unpleasant.
And then it got put to the chi, and then once it was a chi spender, it was just never
Yep.
used ever again.
Yeah, I know, and I know, one of the things that a lot of people, and myself especially, have been excited about, but just the idea that we don't have to play with hit combo anymore, um, is nice, but we're still just kind of left with, for the most part, you just stick with one talent, and you very, rarely change, for most situations. So I wish there was kind of a straightforward answer, to that, but unfortunately, there's none that are good. They're all kind of, oh, Blizzard's forgotten about us, and none of them play Monk. All that tinfoil hat theory that we get on Discord and stuff from time to time.
Yeah.
All right, so to go back to the canceling Fistfury, we got two more questions. Um, Akari Lull asked, do you think canceling Fist of Fury and Weapons of Order will go. How do you think it will go over the rest of the expansion? Would you make any changes to stop this playstyle, and do you see Blizzard doing anything to fix it?
Uh, well, personally, I don't mind it because I'm used to it. So my opinion of it isn't necessarily negative.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I guess you could argue that when you're canceling one of your main rotational abilities, there's something wrong with it. But especially like it being channeled. But I don't I don't know if Blizzard's ever gonna do anything about it unless it's to the point where like we're never casting it.
Right.
If we completely stop casting it altogether, then you're looking at an issue here. But uh, I personally wouldn't make any changes to it because I actually kind of enjoy it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I know that historically they've acted when we've stopped casting things. Like when we stopped casting Fist of Fury, during, when we were using
Old
Swift
dear.
Roundhouse and stuff in Old
Mm-hmm.
Deer. So, um, yeah, I agree and kind of think similarly. All right, so last question, at least off of what I had from Twitter. Um, MJ Takezo asked, "Will Serenity ever be viable? And why are you so damn good at Windwalker? Tell us your secret."
I don't think so. There have been people that have been advocating for it in PvP because of the Kiefer's Skyreach Legendary, but I tried that on the beta and I did not like it at all.
Mm-hmm.
I thought the Legendary was very underwhelming compared to Invoker's Delight, and I will stick by that for as long as it stays that way. I think that being being locked to your target with that buff is not even the only bad part about it. The fact that it's on Tiger Palm when that's like your main like rotation starter, right? Is like to get chi, so you have to like not attack that target that you want to burst on until you're ready to burst on them. That just feels really bad. So, uh, in addition to it not working with Zero Sword and Fire images, like that was another thing like that I thought was really funny. That just seems like a bug, but um, yeah, I think that Serenity is too close to how Weapons of Order plays for it to
Mm-hmm.
replace Northern Fire. This doesn't make any sense. Did you say it was like a DPS loss to pick Serenity over no talent? Is that true?
There was a period of time. Yeah, some of that was when we were still trying to figure out Weapons of Order, and stuff like that. I know one of the J Funk, I think, put a bunch of time into trying to figure out what, this was back in BFA, but what it would take, for Serenity to be viable, compared to Storm, Earth, and Fire. And it was something like changing the 20% damage increase to like 50% damage increase. And certainly, I think a lot of people thought that with Weapons of Order that they would kind of line up super well, and we'd have this kind of insane burst, especially with Invokers. And I think what we found is that the burst is quite insane with Invokers and Weapons of Order, but Serenity doesn't really add a ton on top of it.
Yeah.
And because it takes away it only lasts half of it, half of the duration. It takes away the chi reduction, benefit. It kind of stamps down some of the benefit of Weapons of Order.
And I also think that the problem with it is that it's a 1.5 minute CD, whereas everything else is
Right.
2 minutes. So you have this awkward part where do you want to stack your cooldowns up and hold Serenity for 30 seconds, which you don't have that problem with Sword of Fire because it has two charges,
Right.
or do you just let it rip and then have your Weapons of Order be super weak anyway? Yeah, there's just so many problems with it.
Yeah, and that's that kind of flexibility between the two charges versus no charges, or versus one charge of Serenity has kind of been a long-standing issue between the two, um, between the two buffs.
How do you
Um,
think this would go? What if they made like Fist of Fury channel 50% faster in Serenity?
I mean, that would certainly help. It would help you fit more things inside Serenity for sure. Um, and I think, it would absolutely would just be a net positive overall. Because a big chunk of that time, I think there was and might still be, a period of time where the best way to use Serenity is to hold Fist of Fury, until the last second and just use it for the chi cost reduction. So
Hmm.
I definitely think it's possible that, were they to do something like that, it would certainly somewhat mimic the fact that, we cancel Fist of Fury now when Stormwrath and Fire is up, during Weapons of Order or in PvP. But yeah, I do think that would go a long way, but it wouldn't go as long of the way as if that had been a change back in BFA when Fist of Fury hit harder.
Yeah,
You
I
know,
agree with that. I think that it feels really off. Like it felt fine to cancel it during Two Months Sargeras. The last time I actually played Serenity seriously. I guess we played it in Builder, but for a
hmm
different reason. We didn't even cast Fist of Fury.
right,
But it felt really bad to have this free. Everything's free for 12 seconds, and then four of it you're just channeling Fist of Fury and you're just not doing anything. All
right.
it's doing is 20% more damage. That felt really bad. So uh, that was just something I came with off the top of my head, and I want to see
Yeah.
what you thought of that.
Yeah, I mean, it definitely would be a positive. I think to just the feeling of it, as well, and reducing the channel time of Fist of Fury has kind of long been, something that people have suggested. Um, in terms of how, to get it better. I think to make it a little bit more like, I-beam for Demon Hunters, and that it's short. You kind of just blast it out, real quick, and then it's over, and you can move on. So I think it would be beneficial. One of the things that Fist of Fury has going against it right now, is that damage during, damage per execution time.
Mm-hmm.
So if you could half that, that would be a really big improvement, I think. For the spec certainly. Um,
Yeah.
yeah, I agree. I think that would be a really good change, and even outside of Serenity, I think that would be, it would be a positive change that really wouldn't affect the strength of Windwalker outside of those very small burst windows. If it's still at
I
the
mean, you could
same.
probably make it like make Fist of Fury 4 ticks instead of 5, and then just like
Right.
increase its damage by 25% or something instead.
Yeah, I mean,
Um,
there's a
but
lot of that stuff that could work to just make it feel like it's got a little, the umph that it had back in BFA.
yeah, I think it was like a really good ability in Legion 2 for
It
the
was.
most part.
Yeah, well, and it had, you had the, I can't remember what the artifact trait was, but the one that summoned additional.
Crosswinds.
Yes, and yeah, and sent them to attack your target. So I mean, there was a lot of that stuff that I would have liked to see come back as part of the unpruning.
Hmm.
Um, all right, so last question, and I'm going to adapt the question out of Discord, and then I'll let you go because I know you got more stuff to do this evening. But Tappy underscore asked, how hampered is the average player going to be by not doing things like canceling Fist of Fury? Do you feel like some of these tricks are too difficult, or are they worth learning? For kind of maybe the more casual players, or the more average players out there.
And I definitely do think it's that they're worth learning. Like just like it feels really really powerful to be canceling Fist of Fury right now. I think that it's not too difficult to do. I know that a lot of people are using like no channeling macros on
Mm-hmm.
Fist of Fury and their abilities. I definitely think that's a mistake. I think that that's not really necessary. I think you can definitely learn uh, to not do that. I think they do that because you're clipping your cast, right?
Yeah,
Um,
that's why we'd advocate it for most people. Yeah.
yeah. I mean, I definitely think that you know those macros like help when you're starting out, and
Mm-hmm.
people have asked me about like add-ons like Achille and that. And I think every time I just say I think it would be more beneficial to just try and learn it by yourself
Yep.
and
Yeah,
put time into it that way.
that's how we answer things most of the time too. When asked about that stuff. All right, so that pretty much we've kept it under 2 hours. As we're looking to do. So I very much appreciate you taking the time out on your Sunday evening to chat with me and answer some of the questions from the viewers. So thank you, and congratulations again for your win in Race to World First.
Thank you. It's my pleasure to be here.
And hopefully we'll have Windwalkers in Race to World First, and I'll get you on for another interview in a couple months when we go through another raid.
Cool. Yeah, sounds good.
All right, so good luck. I'm assuming your big shift and focus now is going to be arenas and stuff like that. Are there any competitions or anything coming up in the near future that people should be looking out to watch?
Yeah, I think the first tournament starts like January. I want to say January 16th.
Okay.
So when they announced it, I'd have to double check the exact date. But
Okay.
Arena World Championship plans are here. Let me see. Uh, trying to see.
So while you do that,
January
and sorry, go ahead.
the first. Oh no, maybe it's the 21st.
So
I
sometime in
can't. I'll
January.
find out later. But yes, yes. Sometime in the middle of January is when the radius will start. Yes.
All
Sorry.
right, all right, and then I know I have your Twitter and your Twitch on stream right now for people to see. So besides Twitter and Twitch, do you have a YouTube channel or anything like that, or do you stick to just those two?
No YouTube channel yet. I'm planning on making one in the future, but I don't have anything really to share there yet. So
Okay. All right,
just
awesome.
for now, yeah, the Twitter and Twitch.
All right. Well, thank you again. I can't express how much I appreciate you sitting down with me, and how happy I was just to have a Windwalker out there, repping the class and pushing up those spring green bars on the meters. Um, Makes it a lot easier for myself to justify my own raid spot to my team. So appreciate you. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and then yeah. So for anybody else watching, this has been my interview with Trill. Hopefully, we'll have another one in the future when if there's another Windwalker in the next Race to World First. My social media stuff is on stream as well. For information about monks, you can check out peakofserenity.com or check out our Discord, discord.gg/Peak of Serenity. Every once in a while, Trill pops in and answers some questions as well when we can drag him on there. But when he's not busy being Mr. World of Warcraft, um, so. Yep. So check out all that stuff, and thank you again, Trill.
Yep.
And so until next time, I have a good night, morning, afternoon, whatever it is, wherever you are.
Yep. Thank you. Have a good night.